reasons. He could be scared. He could not want to get involved. He could be a little bit torn. You know, he could sort of think of these people, wow, they're really brave and they're really courageous and they're standing up for what's right. But he also, at the same time, could be like, I don't know if I totally agree with them. And so for that reason, he's not taking action. But he just has this look to me of like, I know what's happening in front of me right now is wrong, but I can't seem to muster the courage to step in and do anything about it. And he just has that kind of look to me. And I may be completely overanalyzing it. But I sometimes think that during the civil rights movement, we mostly kind of focus on these people and these people, right? We focus on the people who were sort of dishing out the racial behavior, and we focus on the protesters who are standing up against it. We don't always focus on the people, I feel like, who were caught in between. And sometimes those people, the silent ones, are the ones that can make the biggest difference.
I think that the most interesting is the guy all the way across the bar, the guy above the guy with like the really bright face and the black shirt, who's like looking at him. He's more interesting.
Him?
He's like, yeah, he looks more disgusting.
Okay.
And that guy that you were talking about, he looks like he's just looking at the lemonade stuff.
All right. Okay. What questions do you have? What questions do you have either that about this direct photo or what it kind of conjures up? Evan.
More like how long have they been sort of surrounding and pouring stuff on these people?
Yeah.
Like how long has it been going on?
Okay. Yeah, cool.
I wonder why there are so many people here. I mean, there's people like go on the streets just to do this.
Okay, yeah, so are those people there just because they're eating there, or did they come in just for this event?
Why did this course of action seem like the right thing to do?
Why did this, from the protester standpoint, or from, okay.
It was
Yeah.
What are the people at the counter feeling?
What are they feeling? Yeah, I was talking to Gus during the, earlier, and he was saying kind of a similar question, like, what does it feel like to be publicly humiliated?
Yeah, the man in the top right who looks like he's not really doing anything.
This guy right here?
Yeah, he's just sitting at the counter.
Yeah.
I wonder what's going through his thoughts, like, oh, do I agree with this or do I disagree with this?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he's taking part in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing to be witnessing, but on the periphery of. Yeah. These are great questions.
I was wondering this when you told us about how like the people behind the counter had told him, asked him to leave.
Yeah.
And these people did. I was wondering, like, the people behind the counter, are they with this or are they against this because like these people are messing up the counter and like are they fully with it and they're like, oh, this is okay because this is something that needs to be done, or are they like against it messing up the law?
Okay.
Like, when does this become violent? Because, like, I know that there was like this all happened, like, not there's obviously no permanent injuries, but like I remember seeing one picture where some guy grabs a pot of coffee and pours an entire pot of like hot coffee on someone and they have like liberation over their face.
We're going to see some footage today of it going from just sort of messy to a little bit more violent. So you'll see. But there is certainly a breaking point. Bless you. There's kind of that mob mentality piece that sort of takes over. Last question.
This is a guy behind one smoking a cigarette.
I do.
Yeah, he looks very confused with the situation.
Yeah. He almost kind of looks like he's like, hey, there's a camera. Right.
Yeah.
He's kind of got that look a little bit.
Wait, Zach, which guy?
This guy right here.
Behind the guy.
This guy right here. Right, Zach?
Oh, actually,
Oh, behind him?
Yeah.
No.
The guy who.
Him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Last comment.
I just like, I was thinking, and like, you can obviously see the black woman's facial expression looks like really like sad, like, and I wonder what the person credited her, like, if she
Okay.
say anything. Or
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue. So I want to take a few notes and kind of introduce you guys to what this event was all about, because things like this don't just sort of happen, okay? What I want to get into right now is the purpose and the context behind this sit-in movement, okay? Last week, we got into the desegregation or the integration of one specific kind of institution. Okay, so what was last week? We looked at the desegregation of a specific type of place, and that was what? Schools, right? So Brown versus Board of Education, the Little Rock Nine. So schools themselves were desegregated through that Supreme Court case and through that demonstration. Even after that happened, there were still plenty of places throughout this country, predominantly in the South, that were still segregated, where blacks and whites were not allowed to be together. Now, could whites go into black areas of business and black businesses? Of course. But were blacks allowed to go into some white businesses and sit in certain areas? No. So this is where this, being treated differently under the law happens. Okay? So let's just get a little bit of a list. It doesn't have to be a ton of things, but when you think about these public facilities, this phrase, public facilities, being segregated, what types of places are we talking about? Like, what are some examples of like a public facility? Nate, you went up?
Restaurants.
Okay, so restaurants are a big one. Any other public facilities? Restrooms, perfect. Bathrooms, absolutely. Anything else?
Water fountains.
Water fountains, okay. Any other ones?
Libraries.
Okay, libraries. Another really, really big one that I'm just going to put up here because are swimming pools. And we know, living in Charlottesville, we know that there's public pools throughout the city of Charlottesville. They're outdoors. They're heavily used in the summer. This is the South. It's a very hot place, especially during the summer. Swimming pools were a huge area of tension. Kind of along the same lines as restrooms and water fountains. When you get into these places where there's physical contact with bodies and stuff, that was an area that for people who did not want blacks and whites to be integrated really rose their hairs and rose their tension. It was a level of closeness and intimacy that people didn't want. So the sit-ins were an interesting thing because the sit-ins were not a movement, an organization that was organized from on high by someone like Martin Luther King or a lawyer or any other kind of major leader. The sit-ins were basically started by 4 guys, and I'll come back to this in a moment, but I just want to show you them. These 4 guys right here, their names were David Richmond, Franklin McCain, Ezel Blair Jr., and Joseph McNeil. These guys were 4 college students. 4 college students. And they went to a technical college, sort of like a trade school in Greensboro, North Carolina. They decided on their own, not with any kind of aid or help from other leaders, but they just decided that they wanted to make their mark on this movement and do something. So they did something seemingly very, very simple. On February 1st, 1960, these 4 college freshmen, and they're freshmen. How old is a freshman in college? 18 or 19 years old. Okay, 18 or 19 years old. So, and honestly, not that much older than you guys, right? 4 or 5 years older than you. They decided to go to a place called Woolworth's, Woolworth's lunch counter. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. And on February 1st, 1960, they went and they sat up at the lunch counter and they ordered food. They were not served food. They were refused service by the person working at that lunch counter. What's the point? What's the point of sitting at a lunch counter and trying to order food when you know before you even enter that restaurant that you're going to be refused? What's the point that they're trying to simply make? Yeah?
That they won't give up.
They won't give up? Okay, what else? I mean, why would you do something that you know is not going to lead to the result? Seems a little insane.
To sort of show what the results are, I guess.
Okay, so to maybe expose the prejudice?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? I mean, what are they trying to do? What's the whole civil rights movement about? Trying to do what?
To let people know that they're not gonna stop until things are just
Not giving up? Okay.
to show that like the simple act of going to the lunch counter and like ordering food, which is something that we kind of find as not really that important or a hard thing to do, would be extremely hard even like 50, 60 years ago.
Totally. I mean, in some ways, it's exposing the ridiculousness of this law, right? Something that we seemingly take for granted. You know, every single one of us, if we wanted to, after school today, could walk up to Mud House and get a cup of coffee with no problem. But the idea of walking up there and saying, hey, can I get a cup of coffee? And them saying, no, sorry. We don't serve field school students here. And that's all the reason they get, right? It's ridiculous.
That still kind of happens now, though, because there's still a right to refuse service bill, and people, like in a lot of states, they're like really against gay marriage or refuse service to
Oh
gay.
yeah, it happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So you know, did these guys succeed? You could say in some ways yes, because they exposed people to it. But in some ways, your point says that they didn't totally succeed. It's not done yet. Okay. So I want to talk about their method. Okay, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. So it kind of seems easy, right? You walk in, you say, hey, can I get a sandwich? Can I get some coffee? And they say no, and you just don't leave.
Do they
Okay.
say something? Do they say like, well, I'm gonna stay?
They don't. So what their method is they order their food. The server says something to the effect of, I'm sorry, you know, no, we don't serve black people here. We don't serve people of your kind, whatever it is. And their method then is just to sit, hence the name, the sit-in. So they're just going to sit. They're silent. They're asked to leave. They don't leave. They don't say anything. And they remain silent throughout this protest. The entire philosophy behind their form of resistance right now is nonviolence. Nonviolence doesn't come from Martin Luther King. It doesn't come from the Civil Rights Movement originally. It comes from Gandhi. And the whole idea behind it is that when someone inflicts physical violence upon you, so when we were sitting, when Cole yesterday was sitting on that stool, and we were all kind of, you know, closing in on him and pushing him a little bit, right? If one of us had, you know, clocked him in the head or pulled him down off of that stool, if Cole was a true practitioner of this philosophy, of this method of nonviolence, he would have balled himself up on the floor and just simply protected himself, okay? And we could have either, you know, taken that as a sign of like, okay, well, we're not going to do anything, we'll step away. Or what happened in the case of most of these sit-in protesters is that once they balled up on the floor, people just started hitting them, they started kicking them, they started wailing on them. And the whole idea is that you, as a nonviolent protester, the more someone hurt you, the more someone hit you, the more someone kicked you, the more you stuck to your idea of, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You see up here that not only is it inspired by Gandhi, but Martin Luther King, you know, he's a preacher, and he talks about in the Bible, you need to love your enemies. And it wasn't even unheard of for some of these protesters when they were being physically beaten to say things to the person who was doing it to them. It's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you. Right? That's their belief. That's their faith. And that's how they can kind of get through this. Want to say something?
Did any of these sit-ins, did any of them die?
No one died.
Okay.
No one died from any kind of physical beating. But many people were hurt to some pretty significant lengths.
Didn't, like, I feel like in like the MLK like protests, people died a lot of times. Well, because of the police.
Yeah. And we'll get to that towards the end of the week. So the final little section of this is that nonviolence comes from Gandhi, comes from Martin Luther King's background as a preacher and the biblical phrase of love your enemies. And you combine it with this idea of political protest or civil rights protest. And people were practicing what's known as civil disobedience. So purposely, as we said yesterday, breaking the law, breaking rules. And people are standing up for what they believe is wrong. And they're willing to take some pretty brutal treatment. And that's why I asked you guys yesterday, thinking about the things that you disagree with, and looking up at that list that we made on the board.